Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism, narcissistic relationships, and healing from narcissistic relationships. Today we're going to take on a topic that I've thought about for a long time, and I'm surprised I never made a video about this, and then I was updating a lecture, and I thought, you know what, let me bring this to YouTube as well. And it's a concept called betrayal blindness, and specifically how betrayal blindness helps us understand the self-blame that survivors of narcissistic abuse struggle with so much. So this term, betrayal blindness, was developed and researched by someone named Dr. Jennifer Freed. And her resources, if you're interested in her work, we're going to have those in the video notes because she has some really interesting work that is really resonant for survivors of narcissistic abuse. She defines betrayal blindness as basically sort of being unaware or unrecognizing or just forgetting about one or multiple betrayals you've experienced. She argues that this could happen with any kind of betrayal, abuse, infidelity, lying, any kind of betrayal. What she believes is that we engage in this unseeingness so we can preserve our relationships, our worldviews, our ideals, and our social systems. So she and her work kind of draws on work of other researchers, like a woman named Dr. Leah Cosmides, who's at, I think, UC Santa Barbara, who argues that we as human beings have evolved to know that we're being betrayed. In simple terms, human beings know and have for thousands of years know when we're being played. No matter who we're being played by, stranger, parent, partner, friend, we know. But there are times we don't want to see it. We can't see it. It's not safe for us to see it. So we just don't see it, and then we can keep things going. But we got to explain the bad stuff that's happening somehow. And what do you think happens then? Yup, that's when we turn it on ourselves. Now, in cases of trauma, betrayal trauma, which is what Dr. Freed calls it, people may dissociate the betrayal. In other cases, we may find a way to soft pedal it, rationalize it as something that happens in all relationships, not that big a deal. Maybe I'm partially to blame too. And the models of therapy we use out there in couples therapy don't help. Everyone is partially responsible for what happens in a relationship, that kind of thing. But by not allowing ourselves to see it clearly, the other thing to remember about people is we are naturally drawn to making sense of stuff, to understanding the why. So that why becomes, it's my fault. Judith Herman, the trauma researcher, argues that children do that for safety reasons. It's too catastrophic for children to believe that their betraying or traumatizing parents are bad, so the child then internalizes the blame as the bad one who is responsible for their own abuse, which allows the parents to remain in a good position. But this can persist into all kinds of adult relationships too. We know betrayal isn't right, but the construct of betrayal blindness means we keep gaslighting ourselves, keep telling ourselves, everything's fine, I'm being ridiculous, I'm making too much of this, I'm being a big baby, I'm being overly dramatic. And then, because we are also being gaslighted by the narcissistic betrayer, we don't stand a chance. In betrayal blindness, we just sort of put it out of our mind. We can maintain the status quo. And it gets very uncomfortable to reconcile knowing that we are being betrayed and maintain the status quo. So betrayal blindness means we can keep moving forward. This concept is really important for survivors because it's important to recognize that this is a natural part of a trauma response. We, as human beings, seek safety, homeostasis, normalcy. Not recognizing the betrayal, which we inherently know is a betrayal, is a way of keeping that safety and stability. It's a false safety, but over time, we become more and more entrenched in this. But this can only work if self-blame comes into the picture. Now, self-blame is central to understanding what happens to survivors of narcissistic abuse. It's one of the primary patterns in people experiencing narcissistic abuse. But understanding where it comes from is also important. And frankly, I believe that's where the betrayal blindness comes in. Listen, survivors, you know this, survivors are often shamed. People say, gosh, what is this person, just dumb? Can't they see what's happening right in front of their faces? Yes, they can see it, but they also can't see it. The betrayal blindness is like a boomerang. It's a self-preservation that ends up throwing yourself under the bus. You do see it, but you can't see it. Because if you see it, then bad things will happen. But the can't seeing it means you blame yourself. You aren't blaming yourself because you're silly or weak or insecure. It's part of a larger traumatic response to staying safe and stable. Normal things to want. What do you do with this? Now, this is where therapy does become essential, to break this down and unearth this pattern in yourself. It also helps to call the betrayal out to yourself, to say it out loud. I am being betrayed. Betrayal blindness works because we shame ourselves, and social support in other places that you may have where you can safely share and speak becomes so important. Dr. Freed's work sheds an essential light on one of the core dynamics of how narcissistic betrayal can insidiously result in the self-blame that really keeps people stuck in trauma-bonded cycles. Betrayal blindness isn't foolishness, it's not amnesia, it's survival. And it's so important to know this, to cut through the shame that so many survivors feel. It's not you, it's all of us. And I can't put too fine a point on this, is that people will say, what is she thinking? Does she not remember everything he's done? Yes, it's there, hippocampus, memory systems, it's up here. But the betrayal blindness means it's almost like you're walling off this idea that this betrayal is happening in the relationship. Another offset to this is what I keep talking about over and over again, is that idea of the multiple truths, right? Multiple things can be true. I'm in a relationship with a person who's betraying me and it really feels terrible, but I don't want to leave because we can't afford it and I don't want to be away from my kids. All of that feels ick, but then at least from working from that place, there may be a greater chance of creating some of the workarounds, the realistic expectations and the radical acceptance. So then you say, this doesn't feel good to stay with someone betraying me, but I am not going to blame myself for another person's bad behavior. It does give you a way to elevate it when you can stick with the multiple truths, break through that dissonance. But the challenge is that there's a natural process here, as Dr. Freed would argue, of this betrayal blindness. Again, it's a really important concept to understand because it really does drive why the self-blame is such a central issue in survivors. And again, on topics like this related to healing, I can only give you that superficial look. If you really want to do the deep dive on healing, please join us in our healing program. And if you just want to read more about it and get more information, the link is in the video notes right there with Dr. Freed's information. But come check it out because it's a way to take this kind of information, use it, and combine it with whatever else you're doing to really push forward on your healing. Thanks again.